Rights Association of the United States and also South Carolina. I speak today mainly from a layman's point of view because we work with people outside the system who have been impacted by the system. The Grandparents' Rights Association supports the preservation of the complete family. We believe for the well-being of the children, the complete family, whenever possible, should be allowed to remain together. Grandparents' normal position in the family is a backup for parents when they need help and a soft place to land for the children who find themselves caught in bad situations involving the adults in their family. We actually propose legislation to protect the rights of the children and their extended family. That is our end result. That's our home run. We know the original DSS was actually the traditional family. If there was problems in the family, people stepped in, including grandparents, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, cousins, everyone like that. The family was all important. That was a long time ago. Things seem to have been changing. The original providers of social services were places like churches, religious organizations, and many volunteers who simply had the welfare of children in mind. But then someone decided the government could do a better job and things began to change. We call it DSS in South Carolina. It goes by different names in every state, but they all do the same job. The problem is the job seems to have had a lot added to the job description. We're at a point where DSS, and again, I want to emphasize this is from the side of the people who've had, the just general population who've had to deal with DSS. DSS seems to think that they're a much better parent than the real parents in a lot of cases. And they act accordingly. Today, DSS seems to act more like a big brother from Orwell's 1984 and less like a service agency. And sadly, this attitude seems to be a reflection of what comes down from the federal government, which funds a very large part of DSS, namely foster care. I'd like to examine a little bit about how that's working. First, we do acknowledge there is a real problem. There's a place for DSS, there's a place for foster care. There are children at risk and they need to be protected. That's a given, we understand that, and we go along with it completely. There's simply too many secrets in the system. The whole system is based on sealed cases, complete secrecy, no third party review, and that's a very bad thing. The lack of transparency hurts. I'd like to talk about something called implied immunity. This is a concept that has a good reason to exist. A police officer needs implied immunity when they're doing their job, a lot of times, say undercover work. But I can't think of a single reason why any caseworker in the field would have to break the law to do their job. These are people who literally hold the existence of families in the palm of their hand, and there have been many cases where that power has been abused. I can document cases where DSS workers have committed crimes against children in their custody and even, yes, lied in court. I can document that. And no one in the system seems to be willing to do anything about it. I can document one case where a DSS caseworker threatened to place a child in the foster system simply because she said the parents couldn't get along with each other. That was in Pickens County. The point is, many workers do abuse their power and break the law and are not prosecuted simply because they're immune. This must change. The Grandparents' Rights Association supports legislation that would remove the so-called implied immunity from DSS. There is no need or excuse whatsoever to break the law when performing their duties. When it comes to family court, the secrecy of the family court in DSS is, in my opinion, an abomination. DSS uses the fact that all cases are sealed from scrutiny to accomplish things that no other court would ever allow. The family court is the only part of the American legal system where a person is presumed guilty until they can prove themselves innocent. Even worse, the people who have no money to hire expensive lawyers are the most affected. Yes, we do have court-appointed attorneys in DSS, and a lot of states don't. That's a plus for South Carolina. But in most cases, the court-appointed attorneys seem to only do the bare minimum and don't seem to really care. I've seen that actually happen. I'm only addressing the area of family court where DSS is involved because this committee is not studying things like divorce cases. We're looking at foster care and that side of the system. So I'll just use one case where I have personal knowledge as an example. In this case, the judge awarded the grandparents the right to intervene if DSS moved to terminate the parental rights. Now, I'd like to emphasize these grandparents that were involved in this had no criminal record whatsoever, had never been in trouble of any kind, except for one time they had a dog get out of the fence and got in trouble for that. I don't think that's very severe. DSS had been unable to find the father in spite of the fact that the grandparents had provided his last address and phone number months before. Somehow they were suddenly able to locate him, and they took him to court in a neighboring county, terminated his rights without notifying anyone, including the grandparents, of the proceeding. That violated a judge's order. The DSS attorney was actually reprimanded in the courtroom by the judge when he was reminded of his own order in the case. His words to the DSS attorney were, "I do not appreciate your violation of the grandparents' constitutional rights. This never went any further than that courtroom, and it's only because these cases are sealed by default." In that same case, DSS pressed for and was successful in placing two siblings first in the foster care system separately and then adopting them to different families. They refused to consider the grandparents for placement simply because, in the opinion of one caseworker, the grandparents were too old and too sick to be able to raise those children. That was actually said in court, and it was written in the DSS petitions to the court. The grandparents were 64 and 65 in relatively good health, and the children were 8 and 10. How many in this room do we expect to see age 75? That's how old the grandparent would have been when the youngest one turns 18. Now, in this day and age, that's not necessarily elderly. And like I said, the grandparents were in relatively good health. The Grandparents' Rights Association supports a change in the law that would make all DSS cases open and not sealed, but provide protection for the identities of all children. This way, third parties would be able to review and detect this kind of thing committed on South Carolina families, and would at the same time save the state money. I'm not sure I can even imagine how many cases would never have come to court, or how many children would have been able to at least stay with loving relatives rather than being placed with strangers in a broken and inadequate foster care system. That alone would save many thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars, simply because the state does not pay relatives the minimum $700 a month per child a foster family receives. It would also decrease the need for more foster families, which would decrease the need for expensive TV ads used to recruit them. According to number 5, U.S. Code 3331, I think we're all familiar with this. All individuals except the president who are appointed to an office of honor or profit in the civil service shall take an oath of office to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that they will bear allegiance to the same, and that they will well and faithfully discharge the duties of their office. To the best of my knowledge, no such oath is administered to any DSS worker, but at the same time they act as government workers or civil servants. Understanding They sometimes violate the rights of families. I believe they should, at the very least, be required to have taken an oath of office, which way that they would be violating when they do these things. On to third-party review. DSS needs true third-party review and oversight. Currently, we have the Foster Care Review Board and the Citizens Review Panel. I'm sure just about anyone who's had to deal with the foster care system or foster system will testify the Foster Care Review Board usually is not much more than a rubber stamp committee that essentially goes along with what DSS wants in the foster cases. I've looked hard, I've questioned many, and everyone I've spoken to say the same thing. The FCRB approves everything DSS wants. That does not seem to be true oversight to me. The Citizen Review Panel, if operated as it was originally intended and manned with a better percentage of people from outside the system, could actually be that good third-party entity. I have served on that panel, and I see the potential. I simply believe it needs to be more independent, and it needs to have power to really make changes and not just make recommendations.
Mr. Schafer, can I interrupt you? And I got some questions. I want to make sure we get them asked, and we've got to try to keep moving this along because we've got a lot of people that want to speak today. Let me ask you about, you specifically stated that you want the law change to make all DSS cases open and not sealed, but the identity of the children would be protected. Are there other states that already do that?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, well, I don't know if they've actually passed the law or not. I do know that it has been proposed in California. It was in their General Assembly last year. I have not been able to find out if it actually passed.
So the question is, do you know any state that actually does that, right? I mean, it could have been proposed, but do you know any state that actually has that as the law?
I don't know of specific states that do have it as the law. I have been told there are some. I'm still doing research on a lot of that.
All right, next question I have is, you stated that you believe there needs to be true third-party review. And you mentioned that in your experience, foster care review boards approve all that DSS wants. I understand that there's different foster care review boards around the state depending on the area. Are you basing that opinion on all of them, or just certain circuits or counties that you are familiar with? I mean, tell me more about that.
Okay, people that I have worked with who have had to deal with the foster system from the client side, all of them have undergone the foster care review process. And I have not found one single person that has been able to tell me that the review board reversed something that DSS wanted to do in a foster case. You know, they go in, they have the review, they say everybody leave the room, we're going to talk about it. When they come back in, the only thing that ever happens is the review board comes back and says, well, we're going to let DSS keep doing what they're doing in this case. There's a lot of legal language in it, of course, but that's basically what happens in most cases. I haven't been able to find a single one where they actually reversed something or really said anything very much against what was going on in any particular foster care case.
Okay, let me just ask you if you could maybe take another minute to just sum up your comments, because we've got a lot of other people we need to get through, and for sake of time, I need to keep moving this committee along.
Sure, no problem. Really about the only thing I had left was I'd like to quote a few national statistics. Okay. This comes from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services website. This is what happens to former foster children. National statistics. And this is from 2011. There's a little over 408,000 children that were in the foster care system. 27,854 of those children aged out. The percentage of the general population of kids 17 and over who have a bachelor's degree is 30%. Compare that with the percentage of former foster care children with a bachelor's degree at 3%. The percentage of the general population over 17 who is in prison, jail or prison, is less than 1%. Compare that with the percentage of former foster children incarcerated at since age 17. Males, 64%, females, 32.5%. The percentage of the general population who experience homelessness over the course of a year, this is again people that are 17 or older, less than 1%. But the percentage of former foster children who experience homelessness after aging out of the system is 24%. The percentage of former foster children who are unemployed 1 year after aging out is 61%. The percentage of former foster children who are unemployed 5 years after aging out is 53.5%. These were 2011 figures.
Let me ask you this, do you mind providing those statistics to our committee? You
Sure.
could just get them to Mason?
You bet.
That way we can have them with our materials.
You bet.
And,
I can do that.
And that would be very helpful. Is there anything else you want to add?
I'd just like to simply thank you for your attention, and I hope that what I've said here today helps you guys in your efforts to make things better for children and to help preserve the American family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.